नमस्ते। म आज तपाईहरु समक्ष एनिमल बिहेभियर को बारेमा नयाँ टपिक लिएर आएको छु र यसलाई लाइक, शेयर र सब्स्क्राइब गरिदिनु हुन अनुरोध गर्दछु। अब हामी लागौं एनिमल बिहेभियर। सो व्हाट इज एनिमल बिहेभियर? यसको बारे हामी डिस्कस गर्ने छौं। फर्स्ट अफ अल हामी अर्गानिजमको बिहेभियर को बारेमा डिस्कस गरौं। All living organism show some kind of reactions to external environment. त सबै अर्गानिजमहरुले कुनै न कुनै किसिमको चाहिँ प्रतिक्रिया देखाउँछन् टु एक्सटर्नल इन्भाइरोमेन्ट को ले गर्दाखेरि तिनीहरुमा केही न केही हामी एक्टिभिटीहरु चाहिँ देख्छौं। त यस्तो भिजिबल जो अटोमेटिक एक्सप्रेसन छ अगेन्स्ट द स्टिमुलाई, यो के को कारणले हुन्छ त? त्यो केमिकल हुन सक्छ, फिजिकल हुन सक्छ, या फेरि एक्सटर्नल सब्स्टेन्सेस को कारणले हुन सक्छ, जस्तो लाइट, हिट, रेडिएसन, साउन्ड, टच, या फेरि ग्रेभिटी। So these are the stimuli. They may be chemical, physical, or any other substances like light, heat, radiation, sound, touch, or gravity. So the expression of organism in relation to external environment is called behavior. So simply behavior के हो त? Behavior भन्दाखेरि हामीले के बुझ्नु पर्यो त? It is a response to the external environment or in response to a stimuli. Stimuli को अगेन्स्ट जुन अर्गानिजमले रेस्पोन्स गर्छन् त्यसैलाई नै हामी के इथोलोजी, त्यसलाई हामी के भन्छौं? इथोलोजी भन्छौं। र इथोलोजी भित्र चाहिँ हामी के गर्छौं त? स्टडी गर्छौं। टाइप्स अफ बिहेभियर, इनेट और स्टेरियोटाइप्ड बिहेभियर। बिहेभियर जनरली दुई किसिमको हुन्छ। एउटा हुन्छ इनेट बिहेभियर र अर्को हुन्छ लर्न बिहेभियर। र इनेट बिहेभियर केलाई भन्छौं त हामी? जनरली चाहिँ जुन इनबोर्न क्यारेक्टर्सहरु चाहिँ आउँछन् त्यस्तोलाई हामी के भन्छौं? इनेट बिहेभियर भन्छौं। The innate behavior generally comes from the parents to their offsprings. So this type of behavior includes inherited mechanism with which animal face the environment. The innate behavior is migration, leadership, mating, dominance, and it is genetic behavior. So genetic means which remains in the chromosome. Chromosome को जीन मा जुन क्यारेक्टरहरु प्रेजेन्ट हुन्छन् and they are inherited to their offsprings. It is called innate behavior. So it can be transmitted through generation to generation. Generation to generation के हुन्छ त? यो transmitted हुँदै जान्छ, one offspring to the another offsprings. Another is the learned behavior. So those characters, those behaviors which are shown by the organism, and these are learned from the environment during the course of time. त्यस्तो बिहेभियरलाई हामी के भन्छौं त? लर्न बिहेभियर भन्छौं। And it is experience behavior. Animal experience गरेर सिक्छ यस्तो बिहेभियर चाहिँ। And this kind of animal behavior is short-lived and depends on the memory of organism. र कति उसले चाहिँ आफूमा मेमोराइज गर्ने क्षमता छ त्यसको आधारमा चाहिँ यो त्यसमा चाहिँ के हुन्छ? डिपेन्ड्स हुन्छ। And organism shows these behaviors at the time of emergency, or they can learn from the emergency situation. So this is the learned behavior. Learned behavior is a kind of animal behavior, is learned through the course of life cycle, or that is from past experience, and this kind of behavior is short-lived and depends on the memory of organism. So एनिमल बिहेभियर अन्तर्गत हामीले चाहिँ आज जुन टपिकमा स्टडी गर्न खोज्दै छौं त्यो के हो त भन्दा रिफ्लेक्स एक्सन हो। द रिफ्लेक्स एक्सन इन द केस अफ ह्युमनमा हामी त्यो खालको चाहिँ रिफ्लेक्स एक्सनको कुरा गर्छौँ। र अर्को कुरा रिफ्लेक्स एक्सन हरेक अर्गानिजमले चाहिँ देखाउँछन्। त्यो रिफ्लेक्स कस्तो किसिमको चाहिँ एक्सन हो त, यो चाहिँ इनेट बिहेभियर अन्तर्गत आउँछ। यो अटोनोमिक नर्भस सिस्टममा डिपेन्ड हुन्छ र अटोनोमिक नर्भस सिस्टम अन्तर्गत रहने भावनाले कुनै पनि अर्गानिजमले आफ्नो एक्टिभिटी के गर्छ त एकदम फास्ट के गर्छ सो गर्छ। त्यस्ता खालका जुन बिहेभियर छन्, त्यस्ता खालका जुन रेस्पोन्सहरू छन् अर्गानिजममा, त्यसलाई हामी के भन्छौँ रिफ्लेक्स एक्सन भन्छौँ। विथिन द रेस्पोन्स विथिन अ सर्ट पिरियड अफ टाइम which is governed by the autonomic nervous system. So quick or immediate response towards stimulus is called reflex actions, and this is automatic involuntary actions. So this it is a involuntary actions. कुनै पनि अर्गानिजमले ब्रेनले के गर्छ त, उसले चाहिँ सोचेर उसले चाहिँ देखेर त्यस्ता घटनाहरूलाई चाहिँ रोक्दैन। त यो के हुन्छ, बडीले अटो के गर्छ रेस्पोन्स गर्छ टुवार्ड द स्टिमुलाई। The reflex action is also known as autonomic or automatic response. In this response, only a part of body involved at a given time. It was first studied by Marshall in 1883. There are many examples of reflex action in human body, that is blinking of eyes, sneezing, hunger, etc. In such actions, the impulses are carried by the sensory fibers from the receptor organ to the brain and back to the effector organs. So brain and spinal cord generally take part in the reflex actions, and in such actions the impulses are carried by sensory fibers. Sensory fiberहरूले यसलाई चाहिँ के गर्छ, रेस्पोन्सेसहरूलाई क्यारी गर्ने गर्छ र मोटर नर्भ्सहरूले के गर्छ, त्यो एक्सनलाई चाहिँ के गर्छ, फाइनल के गर्छ त, फाइनल रेस्पोन्स कस्तो गर्ने भन्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ डिसाइड गर्छ र त्यो मेसेज ब्रेनबाट ल्याउने भनेको कहिले हो त, मोटर नर्भ्सहरूले चाहिँ गर्छ। सो द path or route through which impulses travel from the receptor is called reflex arc. So reflex arc consists of sensory nerves, and then sensory nerves take the impulses to the brain or spinal cord. Then from this brain or spinal cord, the message is modulated, and the modulated message is passed through the motor nerve to the effector organ. So here is the effector organ, and then action takes place. So we can say that sensory organ, at first there is a sensory organ. From sensory organ, the impulse is traveled through the sensory nerve, or you can say afferent nerve, and then afferent nerve, the impulse reach to the spinal cord or brain. यहाँ चाहिँ के छ, spinal cord मा जान सक्छ या फेरि, or we can say here is the brain. So here is a path from which the impulse or message travels through the sensory nerve to the brain, and from brain to the effector organ. So this arc is called a reflex arc. So there are two types of nerves, sensory nerve and motor nerve. Sensory nerve from receptor to the brain, and motor nerve carry message from brain to the receptor cells. Mechanism of reflex actions. So what is the mechanism of reflex actions? So as you see, the center of reflex action is spinal cord, or you can say here is the brain also. Brain also take part in the reflex actions, and major organ is the brain. So and it is controlled by central nervous system. Central nervous system means brain. The reflex action comprises 4 steps: reception, conduction, modulation, and effect. So what is reception? Reception means receive the message. Receive message by the suppose skin. Skin is the receptor organ when we touch the hot object, and then this Stimuli. Stimuli is the suppose there is a heat may be stimuli, and skin is the receptor organs, and from skin the sensory nerves are connected, and this stimuli creates or generates impulse. It generates the impulse, an electric signal, and this impulse is conducted by sensory nerves. It is called conduction, and it reaches into the spinal cord. And what type of message it is, यो कस्तो किसिमको मेसेज हो, यसमा के गर्छ त स्पाइनल कर्ड या ब्रेनले के गर्छ, त्यो मेसेज कस्तो किसिमको भनेर आइडेन्टिफाई गर्ने प्रोसेस नै के हो त, इट इज कल्ड मोडुलेसन. एन्ड देन आफ्टर मोडुलेसन this impulse again transport through the motor nerves, and from motor nerves it reaches into the effector nerve, and action takes place. This action is called effect. The afferent fiber or sensory fiber enters the spinal cord through the dorsal root and carries the impulse from the effector organ to the spinal cord. The efferent fiber or motor fiber passes through the ventral root. So sensory nerve is present on the dorsal root, but motor nerve is present on the ventral root, and this carries the impulse, or you can say efferent nerve carries the impulse away from the spinal cord to the effector organ. The adjuster neuron, spinal cord, communicates between the afferent and efferent neuron. So sensory nerve, and here is the motor nerve or effector efferent nerve पनि भन्छौँ. यो के हो त, afferent nerve. Afferent nerve. So afferent nerve, here is efferent or motor nerve, and these nerves are connected by short nerve. This is the adjuster neuron or interneuron. We can say interneuron. So interneuron connect to nerves or interneuron. So this is the structure of spinal cord, tiers of spinal nerves. We can say here is in the dorsal root there is the afferent neuron, or you can say sensory neuron. It touches with the sensory organs, and second nerve in the ventral root there is the motor nerves, and this is the effector organ, and these two types of nerves are connected by interneurons. And when the message or impulse comes into this spinal cord, it is modulated first, then this message is reached to the motor nerves or efferent neuron through this interneuron, a short neuron which joins the sensory and motor nerves, and then action takes place, or actions takes by the effector muscles. Example, we draw a hand from hot object. So what happens when we toss the hot object? What type of actions takes place, or we can say it on the sense of nervous system or on the sense of reflex actions. So we describe in brief this example. So on touching hot object unexpectedly, so we toss the hot object not expectedly, it happens unexpectedly. The heat or pain receptors in the skin. So in the skin consists of heat or pain receptors cells. These cells are stimulated and nerves impulse is generated. So it is a kinds of stimuli. It generates the nerve impulse. Thus, generated nerve impulse travel along the dendron of the sensory neuron, which cell is located in the dorsal root ganglion, and then along its axon to the spinal cord, where impulse is modulated. So when this impulse reaches into the spinal cord, then what type of message it is? There is a modulation takes place in the spinal cord. on reaching the gray matter of the spinal cord. So when this impulse reaches into the gray matter of the spinal cord, the impulse passes from the sensory neuron to an interneuron across a synapse. So synapse, what is synapse? The adjoining part of the neuron is called synapse. Now, spinal cord send impulse which travels through the axon of the motor neuron, the ventral root to the effector organs. So spinal cord send impulse, this impulse sent by the spinal cord to the motor neurons, and from a motor neuron, this impulse reaches to the muscle, biceps or effector muscles. The impulse on reaching the arm muscles bring about its contraction and pulling the hand away from the hot object. The whole process takes place very fast. The involuntary and spontaneous actions protects from damage due to the heat. So there is action takes place immediately, very fast. So this action protects human from the damage of the skin. So this is about the reflex action of the human, which this reflex action we describe about the withdrawal of hand from the hot object.